Hello there. Thanks for joining me today on Boys to Men. We're in the middle of a series, and this is part 3 now of a series that we're developing on this particular topic, helping fathers bring their boys to a stature of manhood, a man that you'd be proud of and be pleased with and would have as a friend for the rest of your life as a father. There's no better friendship than a father and son. So I want to do all we can to foster a relationship. You'd want to do all you can to foster a relationship with your son so you develop that sense of enjoyment together, but also the sense of friendship, together. I love the backdrop that is there today because it really puts into perspective the topic we're going to talk about today, the talks that fathers need to have with their sons, and some of the things that fathers need to talk to their sons about. So I'm going to go through a little list on that a little bit later, but in this backdrop, you really see a father and a son having that conversation. Now, we don't know what they're talking about, but the fact that they're talking is a good thing. The fact that they are together is a good thing. The fact that they are together alone is a good thing. That they can talk in privacy is a good thing. So I want you to kind of take that backdrop and say, that could be me and my son. That should be me and my son. That will be me and my son. Because we'll have that kind of talk, together. So today we're going to look at a program in terms of just fathers are teachers. Fathers are encouragers. Fathers help kids explore. And we want fathers that will push their kids a little bit. Kids need to be pushed. They need to have a standard, and they need to be held to that standard. And when they go below that standard, we need a father that says, go back and redo it. Do it better the next time. Let's get that up so we can be proud of what we're doing and proud of the product and proud of you as an individual. So that's what we're going to kind of focus on today as we come to part number 3. But remember, part number 1, we talked about fathers and really what fathers are. We looked at what kind of the idea that a father is a protector. A father is a provider. A father needs to be a person that's trustworthy. A father needs to be somebody who is a booster of education, an educational booster, if we kind of use the word, to kind of support and encourage and bring about a positive educational experience for their boy. Fathers, you need to be involved with your kids, not just provide for them, but be a protector of them, be an involved person with them, being somebody who brings them up to a higher standard. Set the standard. Live the standard yourself as a father and bring your kid up to that particular standard. That's what we did in our first program. Now, in our second program, as you'll remember, we looked at the idea of fathers benefiting from the father-son relationship. It isn't just a one-way street going to father to son. Actually, sons and kids in our life contribute to us as fathers. We become richer, we become stronger, we become wiser, we become more sensitive, we become more caring, we become more compassionate, we become more committed, we become more successful. We think of ourselves as being more successful as a father as we involve ourselves with our kids. So kids contribute much to us as a father in the same way that we contribute much to our boys. We bring them up to a standard. We help them achieve a particular standard. We help them in their relationships. We help them in their objectives of education and their objectives of occupation later on in life. We're a very important role. We play a very important role in the life of our kids. But they play a very important role in us as well. That's what we did in part number 2. So now we kind of look at some of the ways in which fathers are teachers, and we learn from what our kids have experienced with us. There's times in our life when our kids stop what they're doing, write us a note, and send it to us as a father and as their son, and tell us what they think of us. Tell us what they thought of us. Tell us what they thought of the experience of the father-son relationship as they grew up. We usually do this on Father's Day. We usually encourage our kids to write us a note on Father's Day. And it could be on our birthday. It could be on a Christmas day. It could be a lot of times during the year when our kids are encouraged to share with us some of the experiences they have had with us as a father and during their childhood years. So I gathered together a series of statements that boys have said to their fathers, cards that boys have sent to their fathers, and try to just share with their father what he meant to them during their growing years of life. So this comes from boys that have now come into manhood and are taking some time to write a card on Father's Day to their father. And although this is not Father's Day, in many ways, every day is a Father's Day. So let me just read here a couple of statements that boys have said to their fathers, and the impact that that might have on a father, actually. Here's one that says that, "Dear Dad, thank you for teaching me how to ride a bike. Thanks for cheering me on at my graduation. Thank you for loving me." Now, that's a pretty powerful statement, because it's a gamut of things. Riding a bike, you helped me learn how to fish, you helped me learn how to do a lot of different things in life. Thank you. You helped me now also in my advancements in life. You came to my graduation. That was encouragement. You see, kids take notice of your involvement in their life. Whether you're teaching them or you're celebrating with them, kids notice that. Here's a second one that a boy wrote, a young man actually now, to his father at Father's Day. "Dad, you taught me to love as a father. I always felt safe with you. You taught me not to be selfish. I love you, Dad." Isn't that neat? Now, every father would like to receive a card of that nature, recognizing that you've taught your kid a host of lessons, and that they always felt safe when you were present, that you provided a home life, you provided a shelter, you provided a safe place for them in which to grow up. Here's the third statement that a young man said to his father on Father's Day. "Thanks, Dad, for giving me freedom to do what I've always wanted to do. I know I did not get what I always wanted. That's okay now. You are the greatest, Dad." You see, kids recognize that they don't always get their way, and they can accept that. They can live with that. You don't always have to give kids what they want or what they ask for. There are times you have to say no, and kids have to learn the language of no, learn what it means, and learn that it's not forever, but for a particular situation. But what this kid focused on was the fact that he had freedom. The dad gave him freedom to explore, the freedom to learn, the freedom to try new things, the freedom to open up a life. The father was a support person, was an encourager. So that's the nature of a father can be to a boy. And then when fathers of that nature, boys grow up to be men. And here's the fourth one that a boy would say, or a young man would say to his father. "You are the greatest. I will always remember our talks, our walks, our trips." You see, that's the backdrop. I'll always remember the walks that we had. I'll always remember the talks that we have. Always remember the things that we did together. See, those are memorable experiences. Kids just put that in their memory bank. And they will always go back to the time that we had that talk in that place at that time. And that's what fathers need to do, is to build that kind of a memory system in their kids. And here's the last little note that one kid said to his father. "Dad, you were my first hero." You know, we all have our heroes. We all have a series of heroes. But the first hero is important. The first hero is what's essential. The first hero is really what is the big deal. And that's the dad. That's the father. So I ask you, Dad, would your kid today, no matter how old he is, would your kid today write you a note and say any of these things which I just read off? If you have an older son, does he send you notes of that nature? Will he send you notes of that nature? Will you be a father that be recognized as one that gave your kid freedom, that your kid loved, that you protected, that you cared for, that you taught, that you walked, you talked to them, you encouraged them, you supported them, you celebrated with them? Would your kids say that about you? Well, I hope so, because that's essentially what a father is, and a father that will bring his kid from boyhood to manhood. Now, what I'd like to do now is to just shift over to a topic that I think is very important. What are some of the things that fathers and sons talk about? What are some of the things that fathers and sons need to talk about? What are some of the issues that need to be brought up in these conversations so that if you were sitting on a pier, if you were sitting in a chair, if you were sitting in a car, you were taking a ride together, if you were taking a long walk together, what would be some of the things that you would talk about? What are some of the questions you would want your kid to ask you? Or what are some of the questions you would like to ask your kid or talk to your kid about? Let's take a look at those. I'll be right with you. Okay, we come now to the topic of dads and sons talk. How do they talk to each other? How do they share information? How do they bring points of openness and where there's encouragement and where there's information that's shared and where there's growth that is developed in the kid as you talk and because you have this particular talk? What are some of the topics? What are some of the issues that I think are important, for dads and kids to really talk about? So if you're sitting on a pier like we're just now referring to, if you're looking at that kid in the eye and if you're having that kind of quiet time, that time alone with your kid, just like we're now talking about, what would it is that you would say? What is it that you would kind of offer as some of the topics? Well, here's one. I have failed too. Fathers need to admit to their kids that they've had a rough life and that they have also failed in some of the things they have done. We recognize the failures that our kids have had, perhaps. But what about the failures that you have had as a father? Now, you don't have to go into great lengths and tell all about your failures and how bad it was and how this was so devastating or whatever. You don't need to go through all the details. Kids don't need to know all the details of your failure. But kids need to know that you, at some point in your life, failed in some way. Now, really what's important is not that. That's not so critical. But what is the lesson that you learned from that failure? That's what's important. That's what your kids need to hear. That's what you need to focus on. Sure, you failed. And that's like a confession, if you will, to your kid. But what a kid needs to learn and to hear from you is, what was the lesson learned in that failure? And how did you live your life after that so you didn't repeat that failure? That's what we want in our kids. We don't want them to keep repeating failure in their life. We don't want that. Sure, a kid will fail. Sure, a kid will let you down. And sure, a kid will misstep in some way. But really what we want is they'll learn from it and learn how to prevent it happening in the future. That's the talk that you need to have with your kid on the pier that we're now seeing in backgammon. Now, here's the second issue. Learn to make yourself happy as a father. Then you make other people happy, but particularly you help your son learn how to make himself happy, how to become happy. You see, if you know the formula of happiness, you have something to share. You have something to give your son. But if you don't know the formula of happiness, if you don't live a happy life, you have very little to share with him in this area of life. So learn to make yourself happy. What is the music that you listen to that creates a happier mood, a joyful mood? What are the books you read that creates a kind of a level of happiness? What are the thoughts? What are the images? What are the words? What are the phrases that you use as a father that brings about happiness within you? What are the happy activities that you engage in? What are the things you enjoy? What are the things that just give you satisfaction and pleasure in your life? Your kid wants to know that. When you go outside in nature and outdoors into the wilderness or into the forest or walk the beach or whatever and get a sense of happiness, how do you do that? When do you do that? Well, that's the kind of thing you want to share with your kid. How do you create a happy mood? What's the music? What are the thoughts? What are the places? What are the people you're with? What are the things you do that create that sense of happiness? Because you want your kid to learn how to do it himself, how he can then make himself happy, because that's a skill you're teaching. So happiness is not just something that comes to us out of the blue. It's something that we can create. It's something that we can induce within ourselves and within each other. So share your moments of happiness. Share your methods of happiness and bring that sense of happiness about so that your kid will have the secret of that and will apply it in his own life. Here's another point that's important to discuss with your kid. When a kid comes home and the grade is not as good as it should be, or the performance was not as good as it should have been, or he didn't come home under the conditions that you set, it's important for you to say to your kid, that's not your best effort, is it? Go back and do better. Go back to school tomorrow and do better and bring back a better grade. Bring back a better paper. Write a better paper. Write that paper over again. Do it better. Write that paragraph over again. The next spelling list, make sure you do it better. In other words, Dad, set the standard, set the pattern, and hold your kid to it. Hold yourself to it. So the idea here is making sure your kid, whatever he does and whatever he's involved in, he does his best effort. And you want to hold him to that best effort, whatever it is. For some kids, it's an A. For some kids, it's a B. For some kids, it's only a C. It's all right. What is the best effort? Here's the fourth point. Treat others that you want others to be treated, how you want others to be treated. You know, you want the old 10 Commandments, but you want the great commandment of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's really what you want, right? So treat others as you want to be treated yourself, as you would want to be treated. So, Dad, set the pace. Be kind, and you'll receive kindness. Be gracious, and you'll receive graciousness. Be compassionate, and you'll receive compassion. Be empathetic, be sympathetic, and you'll receive empathy back. Dad, set the pace. Treat other people. Treat your son as you want him to treat you. That's the issue. Sons follow the pattern of the father. Fathers set the pace. Fathers set the tone. Fathers set the style. Fathers set the profile. And here you want to behave in a manner that you want your kid to behave and behave that way back to you as the father. So treat others, Dad, as you want them to treat you. Treat your son, Dad, as you'd want him to treat you. Here's the fifth point. Hurt people hurt. Hurt people hurt people. And you can go on to that and say, bullied kids bully. See, here's the point. If you're hurt, if you were hurt as a child, if you were abused as a child, there's a great tendency that you're going to turn around and abuse your son. You're going to abuse your daughter. You're going to abuse somebody in a reaction to the way that you were treated. So if you're a hurt person, there's got a great tendency for you to hurt somebody else. You've got to stop that. You've got to commit to not doing that kind of thing. You've got to tell your son, yes, you were hurt. Yes, you were taken advantage of. Yes, you were abused. But you're not going to repeat the pattern and hurt him. He needs to know that. He needs to be promised that. He needs to believe that. He needs to believe that you are a person who will be honorable to him and treat him better than you were treated as a kid yourself. So that's really where we get this whole point about hurt people hurt people. But we also know that kids who were bullied will tend to bully other kids. Fathers who were bullied as a kid will bully kids later on in life and will probably bully their own kid. So, fathers, be careful. Look at your own past. Were you hurt? Look at your own past. Were you bullied? Now, be very careful that you don't repeat that pattern with your boy, with your kids. Don't hurt them like you were hurt. Don't bully them like you were bullied. Those got to be separated out in time and place, and you behave the opposite. You commit to non-bully behavior. You commit to non-hurtful behavior to your kid, no matter what happened to you. What happened to you is your story. What happened to you is a sad story, perhaps. But don't pass it on generationally to the next generation, to your kids, because you don't want them to then abuse their kids later on. So it's a very important issue. We got to look at this issue of being hurt and being bullied. because we cannot pass that kind of behavior on to the next generations. Dad, you got to be very, very, very careful on that point. It's unfortunate to be bullied. It's unfortunate to be hurt in some way, but don't pass it on. Very, very, very important that you do that. Okay, here's the next one that I want to just bring to your attention. Don't always blame yourself for what went wrong. You know, things go wrong in life, and you probably contributed to what went wrong in life. You contributed to a mistake. You contributed to a financial downsizing or to a financial flop that you might have gone through as a family. You contributed to the loss of something. Yes, you probably did. But don't take the blame for all of it. Take your blame for your portion of it and teach your son that skill, that when things go wrong, he contributed to what went wrong. But he may not be totally responsible for what went wrong. There may be a lot of people that contributed to the wrong, to the failure, to the upset, whatever it might be. It's like a basketball game or a baseball game. You lose. But you didn't lose only because of the way you played. You lost because of the way the whole team played. You had a part in it, but others did too. Take responsibility for your portion, for your part of it. That's what you want to tell your kid. That's the lesson you want to teach him. And then, lastly, here's the point. Let your kid know that you love him. Let your kid know that you understand him. Let your kids know that you've been in his shoes once before in life yourself. You know what it's like to be a teenager. You know what it's like to be a junior high kid. You know what it's like to be a fifth grader. You know what it's like to be a third grader, or whatever it is. Let your kids know that you've been there. Let your kids know what it's like that you went through and the experiences you went through. And then help them understand that you understand and that you're on their side, that you're empathetic and you're supportive and you're encouraging, to them. Kids want to know that you're on their side no matter what happens. No matter how bad it is, you're still on their side and you're going to support them. You're going to love them and be understanding and be careful to be part of their life and not exclude them because they made a mistake or they made some kind of an upsetting experience for you or whatever it might be. So put that together in terms of how you, as a father, can continue to love your kid no matter what he does, and that you will continue to try to understand your kid no matter what he does, because you walked in those shoes yourself once before. Okay, now before we bring this to a conclusion, I want to just bring a couple questions to your attention that I think is important for you as a dad to consider and to make sure you have answered these questions for yourself, because it's your care for your family. It's your protection for your family. It's your provisions for your family, which is your responsibility as a dad. Okay, my question to you is this. Do you as a father and mother and family, do you have a will? Have you created a will for yourself and for your family so that should you die or the two of you, mother and dad, die or be incapacitated in some way, that your kids will be cared for in the manner in which you want them to be cared for and by whom you want them to be cared for? You see, a will says this, that in your absence, due to death perhaps, in your absence, who will take care of your kids? Who will raise your kids? How will they raise your kids? Where will they raise your kids? You have a say, and you write that out in your will. That's the purpose of a will. But it also has another purpose, and that is, should you die, should something happen to you, what about your money? Where does it go? Where do your funds go? Where do your assets go? Where does the value of your home go? And will your kids be provided funds so that they can live their life and live it reasonably well? Are you able to really bring to your kids a sense of protection, a sense of care, and a sense of a future, so that should something happen to you, they're cared for, they have funds to be cared for, and they know who's going to care for them? And sometimes you need to tell your kids that. You need to have that discussion with your kids. Yes, we have a will. But if you don't, you need to get one. You get to an attorney, get a lawyer, write up a will so that your wishes are known. Now, if you have no children and you have no assets, it's probably not so really important. But if you have children, it's very important for you to have a will. You don't want the state of California, or the state of Colorado, or the state of Alabama, or whatever, taking care of your kids. You want family to take care of your kids, presumably. And you need to say that, and that's what the will is about. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, here's a question I want you to make sure that you've also answered. Do you have house rules? Do you have rules for the house in which you live, by which you live, and by which your children live? Do you have a set of rules that can be the guidelines, for living? Guidelines for how you function as a family. Guidelines for what happens to your kids under certain circumstances and situations. Do you have a way in which you can say, this is the way that we as a family live? Well, that's what's important. So we're going to talk more about that another time, but I want to make sure that you get the idea that you need house rules to guide the family lifestyle, to guide the family behavior patterns. And Dad, it's up to you to start the process. Set it up, okay? Now, here's another one. Dad, do you have a family motto? Do you have a family creed? Do you have a set of values that you have created for your family? Do you have a statement that says, no matter what the rest of the neighborhood does, no matter what the rest of the kids do, no matter what the rest of other families do, this is how we shall live as a family. We are a non-drug using family. We are a family that goes to church. We are a family that reads. We are a family that takes our vacations together, or whatever. You set the tone. You set the basis. You set a motto. You set a creed. You set a set of values. You set a set of behavior patterns for the family. Dad, that's up to you to set the pace on that. You need to get the family together and say, by what motto shall we live? By what values shall we live? By what sets of standards of behavior shall we live? And start the process of pulling that together and write it down on a list of paper. That's very important. We'll come back to that on another time. And here's another question for you, Dad. Do you have a balanced life so that it's good for the marriage, but it's also good for the family? And, I'll add, it's good for you and your occupation. It's a balance. It isn't that you're only married. It isn't only that you only have children. It isn't only that you have a job or an occupation. You have all of those. And it's how you balance life and how you spend time with wife. You spend time with kids. You spend time in your occupation. You spend time in your friends. You spend time with your own interests that you have. It's balancing all those together. Sometimes it's more of one than it is of the other. But you got a balanced life. And are you doing that well? Ask somebody. Ask somebody who knows you. Ask your wife. Ask your spouse. Ask the kids. Are you off balance? Are you out of balance? And here's the last one. Do you live in a drug-free home? Are you in an addiction-free home environment? Do you create for your family an absence of drugs, an absence of addiction? You need to. You need to set that pace. You need to not be addicted. You need not be a user because you don't want your kids to be addicted. You don't want your kids to be users. What you will do, they will do. What you don't do, they won't. That's the tendency. So, Dad, you have to set the pace. You got to have a home that's drug-free. You got to have a home that's addiction-free of all the various kinds of addictions that are out there. And if you're guilty, you need to start doing something about it and bring that to a place of value and a place of common good, for everybody. We all need to benefit from each other. We don't need to tear each other's down by living a life of addiction of one kind or another. So there you are. Now, before we end today, I had a question that came up, and I want to just kind of ask you the question, and maybe you'll answer it. But if you have a question, call us in and give us the question. We'll try to answer that. Here's the question that somebody raised, okay? Are the parenting strategies you describe for boys also workable for girls and daughters? Good question. I'm talking about raising boys to men. That's true. But a lot of these strategies of parenting, like sitting down and talking with your son. Yes, you need to sit down and have a talk with your daughter as well. Maybe some of the questions are a little different. Maybe some of the themes are a little different. But you need to connect with her in the same way that you connect with the boy. Practice on the boy and then take it out on the girl. But make sure that you bring up all your kids in accordance with principles and values and codes of conduct for which you will be proud as they develop those behavior patterns themselves as they become adults. So thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you next week on Boys to Men. Bye for now.
The Green Gables Care Home is a 24-hour assisted living facility for the elderly located in Clovis, California, offering spacious private and semi-private rooms which are wheelchair approved, catering to the special person in your life who needs attention and wants to live in a loving home environment. The Green Gables Care Home has assisted living in secured homes for elderly with Alzheimer's, memory loss, and for your loved ones needing assistance with their activities of daily living. Call 559-297-9438 and visit greengablescarehome.com.